whole notion of, well, they could learn, they have to learn English before they get to the United States. Are we just going to bring in people from Great Britain and Australia?
Jim, actually, I have to honestly say, I am shocked at your statement that you think that only people from Great Britain and Australia would know English. It reveals your cosmopolitan bias to a shocking degree that in your mind, this is an amazing moment. This is an amazing moment that you think only people from Great Britain or Australia would speak English is so insulting to millions of hardworking immigrants who do speak English from all over the world. Jim, have you honestly never met an immigrant from another country who speaks English outside of Great Britain and Australia? Is that your personal experience?
Of course there are people who come
But that's not what you said, and it shows your cosmopolitan bias.
You are listening to the Liquid Flannel Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Chuck Williams. Joining me in Nebraska is Brendan Williams. Brendan, how you doing?
Hi, I'm Brendan Williams. I'm doing good.
You are Brendan Williams indeed, in the flesh. And joining us in the digital, in the pixels, in Arlington, Texas, is the great Matthew Hodges. Matt, how you doing?
Lock her up. Lock her up. Lock her up. Sorry,
Were you hanging out at a rally or something this weekend?
Well, yeah, I just got back from the most recent Trump speech, and I'm all jazzed now.
They play a lot of jazz at those things?
Not so much. It's mostly Senator Kid Rock's music.
Oh. My name is Kid.
Senator Kid Rock. Yeah.
He plays You Can't Always Get What You Want at all his rallies.
Who does? Trump does?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Which is beautiful. I think he does it. He does it on purpose. He knows.
He knows that he's just going to give them empty promises and shallow dreams.
Right.
But we're going to give you a great podcast.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have to maybe change up his whole playlist when this Russia probe, it looks like it's taking it to the next level. So,
Man,
I think
that probe is getting intense. He's feeling it. So speaking of Russia, what do we have here this week? You wanted to get into some talk about
Impaneled.
Impaneled, indeed.
Searches for impaneled have spiked ever since this announcement. A lot of people say once this grand jury thing happens, once Mueller's investigation happens, Trump's going to be impeached. Problem solved. Maybe not.
Do we really believe that? Do we think that impeaching Trump's going to solve that problem?
Yeah, like
you all know the kind of problems America's got.
Right.
We've got some serious ass problems. So it's like whack-a-mole. You solve one, and a whole bunch more keep popping up. So
yeah, well, and I would feel better about that if we didn't have a left-wing group of people, not necessarily a party altogether, who weren't trying to self-cannibalize right now.
Last week we talked a little bit about the right turning on each other, and I guess the left said, "Hey, don't leave us out of all of that fun." So
right, well, it's it's been working for the Republicans. They're in power, right? So let's just emulate what they're doing.
That can only go positive. So, as always, buckle up, and we'll jump right in.
There's been another grand jury impaneled by the special counsel Robert Mueller. Here is what Jay Sekulow, one of the president's attorneys, has to say.
This is not a surprise. The impaneling of a grand jury and when you've got an investigation is typically how they move forward. But with respect to the impaneling of the grand jury, we have no reason to believe that the president's under investigation here.
I think that Jay is putting very much the best face on this. It doesn't mean that anybody's going to get indicted, but it certainly means that this investigation, when it comes to Russian collusion, obstruction of justice, is just beginning.
So it seems like Trump's not been doing so great lately.
You don't say.
I don't know. The Rasmussen poll still has him at solid 37% approval rating.
Isn't that Trump's favorite poll that he said validated how great he was when it hit 50 a while back?
That is his favorite poll, yes. Ooh. That's the only one he seems to believe.
That's not a good look, yeah. 538 does a great poll average, but they kind of monkey with the numbers in some ways that people sometimes find controversial.
Well, they weight the polls to try to make them more reliable, and yeah, there's There's statistical magic that they do sometimes, and you can disagree with their methods.
We were talking about the Rasmussen poll that Trump cited, and it's like consistently, he cited it because it's consistently rating him higher than most other polls.
Right.
So they kind of adjust it down back as a reversion to the mean. One of the things that's funny is that they have this projected where's the poll? What's the range that the poll might hit going forward based on the current trajectory? But it also has a reversion to the midpoint. So it's way messed up now because Trump has been in free fall so long that it just looks like it like boing, like it would bounce back up because the system really thinks, yeah, it should go back to about 50-50. Like that's where it wants to be, but nope, just keeps falling. The bad news just continues for him because it has now been made public that Special Investigator Robert Mueller has impaneled a grand jury. So, I mean, Trump's going to get cuffed up and just walked into the people's court any day now.
Yeah, can we get a little Law and Order sound effect here?
No, we need Law and Order sound effect. Then we need the Price is Right when you go over on your bid or whatever.
All that and more. I think like a lot of people when this news broke, they were like, what exactly does this mean? I immediately turned to one Matthew Hodges, legal scholar. You've impeached like a ton of presidents, right? You know how all this works.
I wouldn't call myself a legal scholar. I'm technically a lawyer, I guess. But yeah, so what it means to impanel a grand jury. Essentially, now I'm not an expert on federal criminal law. I still think that this is pretty much the same between states and federal law, where what you do is you put together a jury, sort of the same selection procedure that you'd use for, a state jury that you might be hearing a drug case or something. You get a bunch of people together, you have people present evidence in a closed forum with fewer of the kind of procedural rules. This isn't the same as watching A Few Good Men or something like that. They present the evidence and this jury decides not is somebody guilty or not guilty, but they decide it looks like there might be enough evidence here to bring criminal charges. So it's essentially a jury that just decides on whether there's even enough to bring charges. The thing about it is, in this case, it's such a big case, and Bob Mueller he's a competent individual, regardless of what you think about his personal politics. He would not probably have impaneled a grand jury if he didn't think that he was going to come out of it reasonably successful.
Right. He's not just like throwing this together and just being like, well, I have no idea.
Right. It's not just on a fishing expedition.
Right. It wouldn't seem like it, right? If it's a total unsubstantiated witch hunt, like Trump continually says on Twitter, it seems unlikely that this dude would be like, well, let's see where it goes. Let's get a bunch of people in here, present the case to them.
Ride it out.
Unless they've done all this investigation and found that even with all of the weird ass shit that's happened with this administration, there's nothing that you could actually bring charges on, in which case he would probably also send it to a grand jury and say, okay, like prosecutorial team, bring your best case, and the defense team is going to bring their best case, and we'll see what the grand jury decides.
But the thing about it is that something like 99.9% of federal cases that go to a grand jury go on to an actual trial, because again, this is not deciding like, is this he's guilty for sure or whatever.
Right.
It's just like, hey, is it even enough to try to bring it to a trial?
Yeah, that's right. And anybody who has federal prosecutorial experience is going to know that you don't impanel a grand jury. He would just not be bringing charges at all.
Right. Or he'd be saying like, well, we need to continue our investigation in other ways before we get to this next stage, where we're moving through the actual like legal proceedings process. So even if this does go through, the next stage is impeachment, because the president has such a unique role in society. You don't just cuff him like he's O.J. Simpson and, bring him into court or whatever.
Right.
You have to go through this whole crazy impeachment process.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think there's it's important to distinguish here, right? Because criminal charges might be brought federally. I actually don't know what the law is about charging the president with a federal crime, but certainly anybody in his immediate circle doesn't enjoy the same kind of privilege he has. Impeachment's a completely different proceeding, and that doesn't have anything to do with criminal law. Usually, I mean, sometimes they'll use criminal law as their basis, but you can bring articles of impeachment. There's an amazingly broad authority for Congress to bring an impeachment proceeding. And it doesn't, you don't have to cite a specific law that somebody broke in order to do that.
Right. And in fact, the phrasing that the Constitution says is that you can bring impeachment and removal of office for, quote, other high crimes and misdemeanors, which is not explicitly defined as like what that is.
Right.
So easy to get away with, probably. That's how I read that.
But the actual process is actually quite lengthy and quite difficult, because you have to get a majority of the House of Representatives to vote. They actually kind of like vote on it like it's a bill almost, to like pass it through the House.
So simply not going to happen before 2018 at the very earliest.
It doesn't seem like it, although there is a potential scenario where Trump is so unpopular and so toxic that even enough Republicans are saying, yes, I will vote to start this process. Because it's kind of like with the healthcare bill, where they have the vote to like, do we bring it to the next stage? And then it goes to the Senate, and then the Senate has to vote on it. Mm-hmm. But the threshold in the Senate is 2/3. So literally you have to have 67 senators vote for impeachment as like kind of as a guilty verdict on the trial of impeachment. And that is an extremely high threshold.
Sure.
And I just don't see that happening. Like, that's so high.
And that raises the question that I think you actually wanted to dig into, Brendan. Is it even a good thing if we did impeach Trump? Like, even if they could get to that threshold, would that be a positive step or not?
One way of thinking about it is just starting this process is already super damaging to Trump, right? To even be at any stage in the process, regardless of the end result.
Right, which is why he wants to get rid of Mueller and all this stuff.
7 months into a presidency is not a good look, though. It's like a particularly bad look.
It is an unprecedented bad look.
He really set himself up for some sick Twitter burns with that early unprecedented.
Take him to the Twitter burn unit. We got to burn Twit up in here.
But the idea is that, and this is what happened to Nixon, right? Is that they said they started the impeachment process, and then he was like, "I resign. Like, right. I'm not going to actually go through with this."
Well, that's the smart thing, because then you can be pardoned, right?
Right, exactly. And you know, Trump loves the pardon, so he might do this. He might do the self pardon, which is also going to be amazing.
That'll be a constitutional crisis. It would be amazing if he did it, but not amazing in necessarily a good way.
If he did that, what if all of a sudden the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man just starts marching down the street? It's like crossing the streams in Ghostbusters or something, you know.
He kind of looks like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man a little bit.
A portal right in DC.
It turns out that Steve Bannon was Prince Vigo the entire time.
Dude, and the streets are designed like a pentagram right at the White House. Dude. This was meant to happen.
It's all making sense now.
Dude.
This would have been such a better Ghostbusters reboot than the one we ended up with.
There's still time. There's still time. After Trump gets impeached, he can play himself. Like he almost was going to do in Sharknado. Did you guys see that one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, what was this? He almost got cast as the president in, what was it, like Sharknado 3?
Yeah, it was like Sharknado 3. They were in serious talks with his people or whatever about that. Which I think would have been great.
It never happened.
Because he became the real president instead. I mean, it's a shame because he would have been so much better as the president in Sharknado 3. I mean, that was the role that he was made for, really.
We could make this more realistic. It's like, sir, this is about tornadoes filled with sharks.
Yeah, so the take on Twitter was like, no, Sharknado 3 is now less ridiculous than the world we actually live in.
They're getting Morgan Freeman.
Right. Donald Trump's got the upper hand.
Back to impeachment. But they also impeached Bill Clinton, but they couldn't get enough votes in the Senate to
actually remove him.
To actually remove him from office. So he got impeached, but then they were like, oh, okay, well, I guess literally like nothing happens other than be like, well, that was really embarrassing for you guys, wasn't it? Like, good luck recovering. But he did okay. And then when he left office, he was very popular, actually.
Well, yeah. He left pretty popular. So, but like, at what time in his presidency did that impeachment happen? It was in his second term, right?
Yeah.
It was near the end.
I guess that's true.
It took forever, though. I mean, that was a years-long process.
Right.
Well, and that's part of the problem because after Nixon, they passed the independent counsel rule where if the president was doing some shady stuff, they could hire an independent counsel that didn't report to literally anyone. It was not accountable to anyone. And they could investigate whatever they wanted, basically.
Well, so there's got to be like some congressional committee or something.
I think there is a committee, but the committee was basically only approving funding. That was it.
Okay.
And they were just basically saying, like, we're just not going to, we'll just approve any funding that you ask for because we're controlling the House and we want you to impeach the president. So here you go. Have all the money that you want.
Right. And that's how we ended up with
Ken Starr.
Ken Starr, thank you. Ken Lay was the only name that was coming to mind, but different guy.
Right.
Right. Who started out investigating, I believe, what was called as Whitewater, which was a Clinton scandal where they had some shady, like, real estate deals.
That's the one that, like, Vince Foster died in?
Probably. Who knows?
Yeah.
I can't keep all of the scandals straight, really. So,
Right.
but anyway, it didn't really go anywhere, but it kicked off this investigation. And then the investigation eventually found that Bill Clinton was having an affair with the intern, Monica Lewinsky. So, but it had literally gone on for, like just years and years and years and years because they weren't really accountable to anyone. So they could just do whatever they wanted. So they just took their investigation as far as it could go.
Right. You just keep subpoenaing people until you find something.
Right. Until you get the president to be saying like, well, when you asked me, is there a relationship, you asked, and I said, no, there is not a relationship.
Right.
We broke up,
Was, not is.
Right, exactly. And so then they're like, haha, gotcha, on the perjury or whatever, on a technicality. So they just keep this thing going. So after that happened, and then when Bush got elected, we're saying like, well, maybe we should start investigating some shady stuff that Bush was doing. And then they were like, you know what, maybe we should get rid of that rule because that whole Ken Starr thing was pretty crazy, huh? And Democrats were like, yeah, it was. We don't want that to happen again. Let's get rid of this rule.
Right.
So now you have a situation where Trump's doing some shady stuff, but there's not an independent person to investigate him. The person who investigates him is literally works for him.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if he fires Jeff Sessions or tells Jeff Sessions to fire Mueller or tell his underling to fire Mueller because he recused himself.
Which he can't because apparently this recusal, that carries legal weight. Apparently Jeff Sessions can't interfere in this investigation at this point.
Right, but he can just keep going down the line to the next person that can and just bully them.
Which is what happened with Nixon with the Saturday Night Massacre.
Yeah, I suppose, but what I'm saying is, like, apparently the thing carries legal weight. That's why Trump wants to get rid of Jeff Sessions at this point, because Jeff Sessions can't even, like, tell an underling, call this off, because he's recused and, the buck stops with him.
I guess he's been had, checkmate.
Yeah, but like I said, even if this whole thing goes through and the whole impeachment process goes through, if he decides, like, I'm not going to resign, I'm just going to stay through the whole thing, and if they can't get 67 votes in the Senate, which is a huge margin, then it doesn't matter. Literally nothing else happens. He's still president. Nothing. He's not. Maybe there's a criminal trial separately or something, or he gets fined, or something. Like Bill Clinton, when he got impeached, he was disbarred, like his law. And so they were like, he could never be a judge or be appointed to the Supreme Court or anything like that. He can't practice law again. Trump doesn't care about that. He's not a lawyer.
No, he has literally nothing to lose at this point.
They're going to just say, like, you can't be on Time Magazine anymore or whatever. Like, that's not going to happen.
Okay. So we've got to talk some real politics then, because it's not like an impeachment proceeding wouldn't be bad for Trump, right? An impeachment proceeding, anything that's going to go forward with anything that looks even the least bit credible at this point, we know is going to like hamstring a sitting president. So I'm in favor of it. I think they ought to bring impeachment proceedings as soon as they can, except I don't want the guy to actually be impeached. I don't want them to convict him. I don't want them to kick him out of office. Because if they had the ability to even do that, he's much more useful as this fool, syphilitic Fox News grandpa in office than would be like Mike Pence. I mean, you kick Trump out, you end up with Mike Pence. Even if you get Pence out, Paul Ryan becomes president. Like, I don't want a President Paul Ryan.
Well, you're not going to want a president, anyone that's down the list, whoever President Pro Temp is, you're not going to want that person either. But at least then you have a less distracted media, which totally sways things. I mean, it's like right now you've got people talking about the transgender ban in the military, even though that hasn't taken effect. There's no procedure, like there's nothing on it. Nothing's going to happen about it, but we're going to keep talking about it. I mean, he's going to be the distractor in chief. And I think that right now the big thing is A, getting the distraction out, and B, that's like one less Russian tentacle that's, fingering Lady Liberty. I don't know, seriously.
But, I mean, I think that's where I disagree with you, Chuck, because I like there being the distractor in chief, because he's not accomplishing anything. And if Congress can get to the point where they're actually, like, if the House of Representatives is voting positively on articles of impeachment, he's got no power. He can't do anything at that point. He can make executive orders, but Congress funds all executive orders. So, like, he can continue to distract and make his party look bad.
Oh, for sure.
And still not necessarily affect anybody's life. Whereas,
but what's the
if they kicked him out, like, Mike Pence is a career politician. He knows how this system runs. He's the bad guy in a West Wing episode. He's like
but he knows it enough to know not to even attempt certain things. I mean, that's the thing. There's at least a certain modicum of respect or deference to the office,
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Like, the more Trump does not knowing any of this stuff, and obviously that transcript came out today of his conversation with the Australian Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, and it is embarrassingly bad. He's just like, no, I hate this deal because, like, it's going to make me look bad. Like, I'm immediately going into office looking bad. And the Australian Prime Minister's like, okay, but you agreed on this. And, like, this is the way this shit works. So we're going to hold you to it. And he's like, finally, like, this has been the worst conversation I've had all day. And, like, just gets off the phone real fast. The worse he looks in office, like, the better for anybody left of Mike Pence.
No, I don't believe that, because it will change nothing. We just talked about it the other day, how Democrats have essentially been handed a big time decision in Obamacare, and then they're turning around and talking about how they want to work with the other side. I don't know that. And with the corporate side of the Democrats, I don't know. I just don't see it being.
I'm saying that with Trump, the Dems are playing on easy mode, and they're still fucking up. So if we move to a more competent politician, I don't see them doing any better.
I see them doing better when they feel like both sides are playing within the confines of the same rules. I definitely see that. you can't do that with Trump. You can't act like he's playing within the rules, because he clearly doesn't do that. That's how it was even with the Republicans. They found that out in the primaries. But if the Democrats are only facing people that they think are playing within the same rules, I think it's a little different story. I think that they would do better in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of if it's a good idea or not politically, the Dems don't even care, because they think that it's more like a moral imperative to impeach Donald Trump because of what you were saying, because like he's disgracing the office, which I think if you're talking about what's like actually happening, Matt, you're exactly right. Trump is ineffectual at governing. So if your goal is to not have a Republican government passing a bunch of laws that you disagree with, Trump's really good at getting that done, because he's not doing anything. Right. But the Democrats are going to get rid of him, are going to try to do this impeachment thing, even if it's ineffectual, just because they think it's a moral victory for them to be like, well, at least we tried. They're right in that dragging him through this embarrassing impeachment process is going to be terrible for him. It's going to bring out the worst in him, and it's his numbers are going to drop even farther than they already are. I
mean, at that point, he's going to be making, he's going to be calculating business decisions about his brand and whether or not, hey, maybe I just need to bail out now,
right?
Because it's going to save my future, before tax returns come out or whatever. I mean, any of that.
Oh, and I'm okay with all of this. I mean, to make my point super clear, I think the Democrats should absolutely bring impeachment proceedings. I just think they need to drag it out through his entire term and never actually try to convict him. Just make it go on for as long as possible.
Because as soon as it's done, if they don't get the votes to actually remove him from office, then he just goes like, I win!
Right.
Back to Trumpin',
Right. He's going to treat it like a victory and go back to ineffectual leadership.
Right.
Yeah. I guess that's the best case scenario.
I think one thing though that is a potential downside is if they do actually remove him from office, or he resigns because he's like, this isn't worth it, it allows the Republicans to say like, whew, like clean slate, guys, like, back to normal, like forget that Trump thing that just happened, like vote for us anyway, where you got a lot of people out there now saying like, I don't know if I'll go vote for Trump, but if it's Mike Pence or somebody else, maybe they'll say like, oh yeah, back to normal, like never voting for any moderate Democrat.
I'm really concerned about the Republican voter that doesn't like Trump, but they'd probably go for a more like controlled and disciplined politician who is trying to do exactly all the same stuff.
Right. So I think it could almost backfire on them in a way, because if you kind of get Trump out of the picture, then the Republicans can immediately, just turn back around and just say like, hey, Trump, but less tweets and less outrage. And that's not a particularly good outcome for the Democrats.
Yeah, but it's only 3 years that they'd have to suffer through that. And hopefully at that point, that might actually be an even bigger factor in terms of mobilizing people in opposition.
I mean, so it just comes down to kind of how the Republicans react.
If he went into re-election in 2020 with the albatross around his neck of like 2 years of impeachment proceedings, I mean, that's going to be at least enough that's going to galvanize more inactive voters than like the Dems moving right on like abortion access.
And you're definitely going to see, if he is going through impeachment proceedings, a primary from the right. Like, I don't know if you can technically run for president if you're undergoing impeachment or have been impeached. It doesn't seem like you should be able to run again for re-election, but maybe. But even if you can, it seems like at that point, Republicans are definitely going to be trying to primary Trump and say, we can't go through with this in 2020.
Yeah, they'll be fleeing the party, and like we talked about last week, that's already starting to happen. And he's not even, we don't know what this grand jury even has been impaneled for yet.
I was gonna say, couldn't it just be for other people, peripheral people within the scope of this whole thing.
Yeah,
like
there was already
Kushner
a grand jury on Flynn, so that Robert Mueller kind of like took over supervision of once he started his investigation. So this is technically like the second grand jury. But yeah, it's unclear exactly like if it's for a particular person or what. It's probably for the mooch. Illegally bad phone calls to reporters.
Did you hear that
Harassment.
he may have to owe? He may be on the hook for $7 million of taxes now because of this whole situation.
That's chump change to the mooch. Bro.
Well, right, but because he sold his company, he has to, pay taxes on it, and he wouldn't have to necessarily do that if he was in his position with the government for like, I think it was like over 21 days or 30 days, but it was 10 days. So now he has to pay $7 million. So
yeah,
boom.
That's just the price of Trump loyalty, man.
Price is right. Price is wrong. Scaramouche.
Well, yeah. Speaking of infighting and loyalty, the right's tearing itself apart. The left wants in on that action too.
Yeah, the left is not getting along very well. I do want to talk about that a little bit.
All right, let's take a little break and we'll come back to that.
Try B86543 Moscow.
Yes, sir.
You would never have found him through his office, Mr. President. Our premier is a man of the people, but he is also a man, if you follow my meaning.
Degenerate atheist.
What did you say?
I said Premier Kissoff is a degenerate atheist.
Mr. President, I formally request that you have this ignorant brute. I'm sorry.
Mr. President, I think they're trying the number.
You filthy bully, you filthy guy! I've tasted your ass before, eh? You war-mongering bully!
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
It's been an incredibly difficult and honestly very frustrating conversation because, yeah, dude, I know that I'm white. I know that I'm super privileged. I'm straight. I'm cis-het, white, grew up relatively privileged, and
tobacco bias.
And that's not even the fucking problem. The problem is I'm watching a bunch of like black, queer, trans, female, whatever leftists get completely left out of the conversation because the liberal cognoscenti, the liberal commentariat, has decided that anybody who's attacking any Democratic person, any Democratic potential candidate is a sexist or a racist, depending on, what fits the bill. Instead of responding to any kind of criticisms that people have of, Kamala Harris, like her record on criminal justice is really bad. One option would be for them to say, she did what she had to do to like get the job and get into the position. And here's how we're going to address the system that she was working in. The other way to do it is to say like, oh, well, anyone who criticizes her is a racist. Anyone who criticizes her is a sexist.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a difference between saying like, it's a shame that someone like Kamala Harris is, so tied to, unwinnable conversations about, like race and sexism and stuff like that a normal white male candidate wouldn't have to deal with. There's a difference between saying something like that and saying like this particular person is a racist person because they said maybe she's not the best candidate on particular issues. Like,
right. No, and I agree with that.
That's a totally
and
different thing.
I do agree that there's also, that a woman or a person of color is held to a higher standard, that they're under more scrutiny to make sure that they have, a cleaner record. But when somebody goes after like a specific policy problem, is that racism? Like we can't. Oh, basically what they're telling the left is like, you can never again, like criticize any woman or person of color who is running under the Democratic banner because that's just racism.
Well, I'm really sorry for the non sequitur here, but speaking of record, did you see that half of the people running for mayor of the city of Detroit are convicted felons?
No, I didn't, but that's awesome. Good.
And
good
it's
for
like,
them.
well,
that's fucking awesome.
Are half of them also former mayors of Detroit or whatever? 'Cause didn't they?
No. Actually, the incumbent is not a felon, and the other front runner is not a felon. But then I guess half of them are, and it's like gun crimes and assaults with the intent to commit murder and stuff like that. So
You have to wonder sometimes if those are like
for the people, though.
Are those like people who are like being paid to run to get negative publicity or whatever?
Right,
you know what I
right.
mean?
Well, honestly, and for Detroit, I mean, what was it like Detroit in the 70s, 80s, or whatever? I mean, if you're a person of color, I think you could catch a charge really quick up there. So, there's some of that going on. Isn't there going to be like a movie about that coming out this summer? Detroit?
I think it's already out. The Boyega movie or whatever.
Yeah, I want to see that.
Yeah.
I hear it's incredibly depressing.
I'm sure it is. Exactly.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think white people should be depressed about the state of people of color in this country.
But you want it to be constructive depression and not
I don't even necessarily care about
so
that.
racist.
I do think that this problem with like the near attendants and who's this other guy? The people who are really upset about being called corn cobs on Twitter.
Dude,
oh yeah, I didn't even.
I tried
really
jumping
follow that.
into the menslib Slack and I saw that corn cob for a second. I'm like, what the hell is
all right.
Man,
All right.
I am so
See,
behind
because
a-
it's
yeah.
not actually that complicated. The
Fill me
whole
in.
corn cob thing grew out of a tweet from Drill, who's like the godfather of weird Twitter. And the tweet is something like I'm not owned, I say as I slowly shrink and turn into a corn cob. So it became this kind of shorthand for people who were absolutely getting owned online and still, claiming that they weren't owned. And that has become a thing that like lib Twitter has really gotten salty about, which it's like the gold standard now. If you can get one of these like liberal tweeters to get pissed off about being called a corn cob, that's like the best corn cobbing you could possibly do. It doesn't have any meaning outside of the context of being like a shitty person on Twitter who's getting owned in a discussion.
Okay.
Right.
And that was what we were talking about.
Incapable.
On Men's Lib,
Wait,
too.
so it's not racist? It's not racist against Nebraskans? I'm not convinced.
Right. Seriously.
Are Nebraskans a race?
Yes.
Well, I just think it's biased against people that smoke corncob pipes.
Yeah.
And
No,
frosted
that's true.
snowmen.
Frosty.
So that's like Nordic bias or
Right.
something. I don't know.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Check your non-snow person privilege, you guys.
Jeez. You walk out the door, you got to think about a lot of things these days.
Yeah, that's why Huckleberry Finn is actually the poster boy for the corncob party.
Right. Oh, man.
But yeah, I mean, I think on the racism thing, I think the fix on the racism thing is to just make, even though it's dumb, like make your criticisms constructive in a way, you know what I mean? Because I can totally see where people will fly off the handle and just be like, well, just if you're just pointing out negative things, then people might say like, well, look, this is I don't want to say it's like racist, but I can understand how people would say like,
Why is this different from anyone else?
well, or just I mean, just to say like, look, you're not advancing the discourse. You're just tearing someone down, and it's easy to tear them down because they're already at a disadvantage.
Okay, I
You're just
agree with
piling
that
on to
for
the
sure.
racism.
But I think if criticisms are coming from a specific policy perspective, like for instance, if somebody wanted to attack Hillary Clinton on the basis of being super cozy with Wall Street, is that sexism?
No.
I'm not sure that it is, at least if someone has a record of also attacking like male politicians for being super cozy with Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
No, totally. But like I said, I just think that inoculates you from the attack of you're being racist by framing your criticism in a constructive and positive way.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm in favor of that. And I mean, frankly, anything that would help the left be able to criticize some of these Democratic candidates is going to be helpful.
And that's one of the things that that differentiates the left and the right is that the left it's almost easier for the left to criticize their own candidates versus their other versus the Republican candidates, because your criticism of the left is often more nuanced and thought through, where your criticism of the candidates on the right are like, that person's a crazy idiot.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the right it's the total opposite. They will viciously attack people on the left for unreasonable things while just completely ignoring the flaws of their own candidates.
Yeah.
Case in point, Donald J. Trump.
Of course.
Well, I think the thing that really frustrates me is, the left was making very similar arguments against John Ossoff when he was running in New Orleans, and you didn't have all these.
You're just saying that because he's a white male,
right?
How how his his detractors were like racist against white people or something like that. Like they were
racist against millennials.
Like, Democrats want to use disenfranchised populations as a bludgeon against the left, but then their own policies are terrible for disenfranchised minorities.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up John Ossoff, because it's like his opponent on the Republican side was a woman. So, I mean, none of the people on the left were taking his criticisms of his opponent there and saying, well, that has to be misogyny or sexism or anything like that. But when it's Ossoff against maybe someone also running on the Democrat side, they're tossing that out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and you see the same thing when somebody criticizes like Nancy Pelosi. Like, maybe Nancy Pelosi isn't the most effective leader of the Democratic Party simply because everybody fucking hates her. And they're like, oh, you just don't like to see a woman in power. Like, well, no. If it were, I mean, like, if Chuck Schumer had the same reputation and the same just terrible mix of policies, like, we'd probably be attacking him too at the same level.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think that's borne out by the evidence.
You don't think so? You don't think that if there were like a white man who had all of Nancy Pelosi's same policies, he wouldn't be dragged the same way by Republicans and the left?
No, that's a good.
I mean, Barney
point.
Frank
that's
got
a good
it
way of
pretty
putting
bad.
it.
Barney Frank also is LGBT, so I mean, that kind of there's that same potential for the possibility of there to be subversive reasons to opposition to that person in addition to the candidate.
I suppose so, but I think my overall
Barney
problem
Frank
is that, like, people want to treat like the left and the alt-right as the same because they hate the same people, and so they want to make it so that the left and the alt-right hate the same people for the same reasons, and I think that's where the calculus completely breaks down. The left has not always been the most inclusive place, though. I mean, if you look at the history of the left in this country, it has been way more inclusive than any of the major parties, but whatever. Maybe like in the last couple of decades, it hasn't been the most inclusive place, but it's working on it. And the left of any party is more aware of, or the left of any wing of a party is more aware of, like, identity issues, and it isn't, I don't know. I don't think that we're cultivating this, like, misogynistic, racist, transphobic sort of environment that the liberal commentariat wants to make it out to be. I think they're using that as a shield for, instead of addressing their own shitty policies, they can just call people racists.
Right.
Yeah.
Or, transphobic or homophobic and all of those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think a lot of this comes out of the fact that people probably on both sides of the political spectrum, but mostly on the right, will routinely make like false arguments that they don't agree with so strongly that you think that those are serious arguments. Like when like when that fucking Stephen Miller dude
Well,
was doing his press conference,
We
and
gotta
he
play
started
some of
saying
that.
like, "Oh, you think that only Australians and British people are like the only people that
I'm
speak
offended,
English or whatever?
sir.
Like
I
you're
couldn't be more
the
shocked.
racist, you know?" That's
Cosmopolitan
right,
bias.
exactly.
What the hell is cosmopolitan bias?
it's code word for Jew, apparently.
Well, it's absolutely
Code word
that,
for
but
Jew.
I'd
Yeah.
like to believe that
But
it's
he's
actually
Jewish.
code word for people.
no,
who-
not this guy,
Who?
Stephen Miller.
Steve Miller's Jewish. He grew up in a Jewish family.
Not anymore.
Hold up.
I'd like to believe that
I'm pulling up-
cosmopolitan bias is people who really only pay attention to articles about like 15 ways to
In
please your
Cosmo.
man's dick.
To please your man.
That's that CNN guy or Jim Acosta or whatever to a T. He's like up in that grocery store every day. But I mean, he'll go out there and say like, "I can't believe you would denigrate, you know, the people's, you know, the English speaking brown people of the world in that way, sir." You know, where it's like it's a completely disingenuous argument, but they're using it because it is effective at stopping the debate, and it just lowers the discourse of everybody.
Absolutely.
And I think it leaves people primed to say that stuff.
For the longest time, I've wanted for people on the left to be like better at this kind of discourse, you know, do the same kind of propagandizing that the right does. And now that it's actually happening, you got your Neertandens and Louises Mensch, and like it's terrible. Like go back to what it was before. It was better when people were actually trying to be honest on the left.
Oh, for sure. But like, I don't know, man. It is so frustrating because you look at the way that the right does it. Like when they were attacking, like it's almost like the way that the right has been framing arguments is that they'll go out and say like, you know, Hillary and Obama are so terrible. They are, you know, they're breaking the law. They're doing all these illegal things. They're straight up murdering people. You know, they're despots gone mad with power.
Right.
So that justifies us to do it worse because we're just defending.
Yeah, we're the
ourselves
freedom
as
fighters
to what they're
against
doing, right?
the
So
you know, the autocracy.
right, they basically say like Obama's an autocratic, you know, dictator who is overriding Congress or what, you know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He's writing his secret backroom Obamacare deals, you know, cutting backroom deals, making a secret bill. So it's okay when we do it now, even worse because like Obama
Because we
started
have
it,
to-
right? They're setting
we have
those
to
lines or
correct
whatever.
it, Yeah.
And it's super effective for them. But also like, I don't want the left to do that because it's fucking shitty.
Well,
yeah,
it's shitty
then
and it
creates
causes
a
us to
cycle.
fight amongst ourselves, you know? Like, again, like the Kamala Harris thing, I do not have a personally super strong opinion about Kamala Harris. You know, she seems electable. That's good. Like, that's good for me. I think that the Dems need to be putting forward electable looking candidates. And I think it's shitty that if somebody comes at her from the left and says, like, what about this policy that you supported? Instead of just engaging in that debate the way the left and the liberals, anybody left of Mike Pence, basically, has ever done, and say, like, look, you know, this happened, and, you know, this is what the senator supports now. It's just, like, nah, you're a sexist. Like, you're a Bernie bro, you're a Chapo Trap House listener, like, you're obviously a white person, which is terrible when you've got a whole bunch of leftists who are people of color or queer or trans or women out there on Twitter going like, I want answers to this too. And they're like, nope, everybody who's criticizing Kamala Harris is like a white Bernie bro.
Right. Well, and, you know, honestly, to most of those people, I want to say the fact that you're caring right now in 2017 about who's running for 2020 is kind of a misplaced prioritization of what needs to be happening right now. I mean, if you want to talk about Kamala Harris in the year 2020, that's fine. But if we're talking about first-term senators and stuff, why don't we give this a little bit more time before we even have this discussion? I mean, I would like to I would like to just be over the last election and just kind of reset now. And
I mean, good luck
live
with
in the
that,
moment.
Though. Nobody's over the last election.
Well, I know that we can't be over it, but it's like, I would like to not just go straight from 2016 to 2020. There's like a few years in here that stuff is going to happen in, and we need to be kind of focused on that too. So,
no, I totally agree with you, Chuck. And I mean, that's been a big problem, and it's a major frustration with, like I said, anybody who's left of Mike Pence, that everyone is so interested in relitigating the 2016 election, and it's been going on for, I mean, we're 6 months into the Trump presidency, and we still have the left going after liberals and liberals going after the left, and people pointing fingers and saying, like, look, you voted for Bernie, like Bernie's trying to split the party, or Bernie Sanders supporters pointing at Hillary Clinton and saying, like, look, she didn't do enough. She didn't campaign in these places. She didn't, she didn't have any kind of a policy platform that people could get excited about. And what's the truth is probably like both of those things, both of those things are probably true. And both of those wings could probably be learning from each other and putting together something that's really potent for, I mean, the 2018 election, like we're going into 2018 election season now. And if everyone could pull together, we could probably retake Congress. But there's some super dedicated people who don't want that to happen. They'd rather be right than win.
Well, it's the equivalent. It's like when people start putting the Christmas decorations up after Halloween. It's like, you've got another holiday in the middle there that you need to kind of plan for and prepare for. So, it's the exact same thing. Democrats are being given the biggest gift in the world of one of the most dysfunctional Republican parties we've seen in my lifetime.
Absolutely.
In terms of, just not being able to function without just a swirl of scandal and dissent and resentment, even within their own party, which we even covered on the episode, just the other day. But Democrats aren't going to take advantage of that if they're too busy cutting at each other. So
yeah.
But I mean, there's something to be said for like the process of like what's supposed to happen is you go through all these, processes of like who's running, who's they're having debates. Like, I mean, on the Republican side last time when Trump won, there was like debates where they had to split the debates into two different sides because there were so many people running. Something. I mean, do you think that's going to happen on the Dem side here coming up?
I hope not, man.
I mean, not if the DNC and the DCCC commentariat have anything to say about it.
Well,
I mean, I guess I'd rather see something like that happen rather than something like what happened last time, where the DNC was putting their finger on the scale for, one candidate, and there's only two candidates. I mean, having only two candidates just leads to
there's another guy.
Well, I mean, there's right. I mean, at first there was four people or whatever with Lincoln Chafee in there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as long as Jill Stein never gets anywhere close to a ballot again, I'll be happy.
Right.
As long as she never gets close to a dinner table with Putin again. And
she can have as many dinners
probably
as she
happen.
Wants. I just don't want to have anybody have the choice to vote for her.
Sure.
But I almost wonder if having like a larger primary would allow the left to, in a way, kind of work through some of these issues, right? Work through them, because part of that process is supposed to be that you're, by having a discourse, by debating, by having, discuss, seeing who can win the argument, who can win public support, you're supposed to kind of work through some of those issues.
I would love for that to be true, but as we witnessed with the Republican Party, it would be easy for someone who really does not have an overwhelming majority of support to just kind of coast through there and make fun of people and take pot shots and actually avoid substance and just be a celebrity on stage or whatever,
Zuckerberg 2020.
Yeah, right. I think the thing is, I mean, Hillary was she was the like Vegas odds, 99-1 to win, right? Because she was the one who was actually experienced. But I think we can look at it in hindsight and go like, well, she didn't win because A, she was a problematic candidate, and B, because the Democrats didn't put forward a terribly exciting, I mean, what was it, like 47% of the country simply didn't vote in the last presidential election. If they had picked up 1% of voters by offering them something that they wanted to vote for, she would have won in a landslide. I mean, she won the popular vote. She would have won in an electoral landslide as well.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
So here then is a lesson in safe logic. I cried when they shot Medgar Evers. Tears ran down my spine. And I cried when they shot Mr. Kennedy, as though I'd lost a father of mine. But Malcolm X got what was coming. He got what he asked for this time. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. Get it?
Brendan, tell me who the hell I'm looking at right now.
So
this is our high note, right?
This is a high note.
We're going out.
For our high note this week, we weren't sure what to talk about, but we were like, what's been in the news lately? And we had to talk about this ridiculous human person.
Is it a human person?
We'll find out. So Trump's pick for the USDA, which is the Department of Agriculture, to be the chief scientist, has a blog post from 2011 where he called Democrats and progressives liars, race traitors, and race traitors.
So like traders, like fur traders, like back in the day, they set up the trading
Is that
posts.
like a slave trade?
They traded
thing?
races.
No, I think it's more like when you're playing Magic the Gathering and you like swap out cards.
Yeah.
You've got like an instant that allows you to swap out.
He was
mana
just like slamming them for like, I played D&D with some progressives and like every character they rolled was a different race. It's like, just pick one. And race traitors, of course, is where you're friends or ever speak or interact with anyone who's a different race than you, I guess.
Yeah, they betray your race on the prison yard or something. I'm not sure where that would be. But the one thing that should be clear about this Clovis guy is whether it's like
Dr. Clovis.
Dr. Clovis. Doctor has never been around an actual race like a foot race at all. This dude looks like he put an easement on Barney Frank's body. I don't know.
No, totally. He looks like he's basically like a Kurt Vonnegut character. I mean, down to the name.
Yeah.
Like greasy, slick back, like silver fox hair, except he also looks like Dr. Robotnik
right
from the neck down.
If Robotnik and Alfred Hitchcock had a baby, that it would be Sam Clovis.
Yeah, man. I cannot believe this guy.
Yeah.
And to be the top scientist or whatever and just be like, all Democrats are race traitors. Like, what? Like, how are you a scientist, man? Like, that's not...
Well, it wasn't even Democrats or race traitors. It's that progressives are race traitors. Right. Not defined, not clearly defined, just anybody who's more progressive than he is, I suppose.
That seems like a big bucket.
Well, yeah, and it's like, I'm progressive about, women's rights. And he's like, you freaking race traitor.
Look at
you can be progressive about a lot of things.
Look at how the Sioux City Journal, Iowa newspaper headlines this story. Clovis's old blog posts on racial themes are highlighted.
Racial themes. Yeah. Of betraying
are
race.
highlighted because it's the most interesting thing about this guy who looks like Bizarro World Santa Claus.
I'm sure if someone like Michelle Obama said like all alt-right people are race traitors, that they would have covered it in such a measured tone,
Absolutely.
Well, I love this. I love this
Absolutely.
line from The Guardian that, Clovis is a departure from previous USDA's chief scientists without a strong science background. It's like, no, yeah, that actually sounds like it probably would be a pretty big departure.
Well,
without a strong science background.
what we really need is
before we had scientists, and now we have a not a scientist.
right.
But he has a PhD. That's science. He's a doctor.
What, from like Bob Jones?
Yeah, it's a PhD.
I'm looking it up here. Hold
it's a
on.
PhD in race baiting, I think,
Right.
because he does seem to be an expert at that.
Yeah, interesting, like reworking of a perspective here, where he also accused progressives of keeping minorities in this country enslaved to government with the supposed desire to essentially eliminate people of color from the American landscape.
Ooh.
Like, who are you working for?
He's going-
Man, like, you're
So-
working for a president who wants to like build a wall and ban all immigration.
He's working for the USDA, man.
Holy shit. Can you believe that this dude went to the Air Force Academy? Like,
That was a long time
I was
ago.
going to say, like, it doesn't have date. This Wikipedia page is the worst Wikipedia page.
No, he was like the tire guy though. We're not talking Top Gun here.
Right. No.
He didn't even get to like operate the fuel pump.
So he went to U.S. Air Force Academy. Then he received his MBA at Golden Gate University and a PhD from the University of Alabama. Roll Tide. Dude, this dude rolls, that's for sure. But no, I'm sorry. We're body
The dude is nothing but rolls.
We are body positive on liquid flannel. However, this dude.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I will make an exception if you are literally a cartoon caricature of a Southern racist.
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously, he looks like he's about ready to put on some Colonel Sanders shit.
Oh, did you guys see where they took old episodes of Captain Planet and dubbed them with Trump and Al Gore?
No.
Oh, fantastic.
It was pretty funny.
I'll have to check that out.
They fit pretty well. There's a Captain Planet character called Hoggish Greenlee, which is a perfect animated version of the current president. Well, I think we definitely achieved the high note this week.
There we go. About as high as it can get. Well, thank you for tuning in. And yeah, so I guess this is kind of the new format now. We're changing recording days, and we hope you all enjoy that. But definitely give us feedback on that and anything else, and be sure to rate us on iTunes and follow us on SoundCloud. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter at liquid_flannel, and find us on YouTube. You can follow us. Where else are we at? We got a Facebook
Dude,
page.
we're
Yeah,
everywhere.
we're on Facebook now.
Just Google it,
We're
man.
on Facebook, man. We're all around the world.
Just Google Liquid Flannel. You'll find us.
Yeah, you'll find us out there, and you can also find us individually, starting with me at Shaggy2Trope. Brendan, where can they find you?
I'm at Brendan Williams with one L.
And Matt, where are you at?
I'm at Matt the Great with a W.
All right, thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.
hear what Captain Granite has to say. The power is yours.
But the bottom line is that the Paris Accord is very unfair